Hello YouTube, and welcome to my show, Sexism in Movies and TV. For 5 years I've been doing this show, and usually in a new seasonal intro, I give the reasons as to why I do it. Well, I've come up with some new reasons, in addition to the ones that I would give out in the last intro. I do this show to point out all of the horrible misandry, which means hatred of men and boys, that happens on mostly American TV and in American movies. But the really sad part of this whole thing is the fact that we're so desensitized to it that a lot of people can predict when it's coming. And what's even worse is that there are some people who actually find it funny. Okay, a new reason I thought of as to why this show must continue is because the toxic portrayal of men and boys that comes from American film and television is actually the one very big factor as to why men and boys basically have such low self-esteem. And the other half of the reason as to why stuff like this gives young men such low self-esteem is because we live in a world where stuff like this is constantly everywhere, all over the TV screens, all over the internet, all over social media. And if a young man or boy is not in a relationship, assuming he's 13 or older, his peers will instantly start picking on him and calling him gay. Then throw in the fact that there are absolutely no positive male role models on TV or in movies for the most part, and when some actually do appear, these insane feminists will instantly label it toxic masculinity and do whatever they can to make sure that it's ripped off the air and essentially replaced by their own pro-feminist, anti-man, anti-boy propaganda. Another reason why I do this show is to point out the fact that the corporations who make these movies and shows, they want to gain social brownie points, which is why in most Western franchises there are no positive male role models. They seek to gain social brownie points by essentially trading old stereotypes for new ones. They think they're being progressive when they're not. They just exchanged good archetypes for bad archetypes. And they do this to be progressive and get social brownie points. And it usually ends like this. And the third and final reason as to why I do this show is because the portrayal of men and boys, not just in movies and TV, but in all media, has become horrific. To the point where it's downright dehumanizing. And I could see some kid's little sister treating him like bullshit because the characters she watches on TV treat the men and boys around them like bullshit. And it could either lead to this boy becoming abusive towards his sister, or developing really low self-esteem. So anyways, in closing, this show exists to point out the horrible misandry that has infected movies and TV. Now, with that said, on with the review. Okay, in this episode of Sexism in Movies and TV, I'm going to be going over the episode of The Simpsons, Little Big Mom. An episode that is so misandric, I didn't even watch it for this review. I got every bit of info I needed from the Simpsons wiki. So I'm basically just going to give you a short synopsis, and then I am essentially going to tell you every single thing that is wrong with this episode. Marge breaks her leg at a ski resort. So, anyways, while she's in the hospital, she puts Lisa in charge, and I can only assume that she asked Patty and Selma to watch Maggie until she recovers, which literally drives Lisa crazy and inspires her to prank them into thinking that they have leprosy. Before the very painful treatment, Bart actually figures out it's a prank when he saw Homer eat one of the sores, and the episode ends with them actually going through with the surgery they did not need, and revealing that they knew they didn't have leprosy and were only doing it to essentially eat for free and stay there. Okay, so now that I've reviewed this misandric piece of crap, now I'm essentially going to tell you everything wrong with it. 1. Homer is an adult. It doesn't matter how immature he acts. Marge cannot make decisions like this completely from out of nowhere, without his input at all. He may be stupid and immature, but he legally is an adult. And here's the thing. Marge can't just put Lisa in charge and have Maggie babysat by Patty and Selma. I mean, if anything, all three kids would be under Homer's care. I know the episode would be drastically different, but they could have easily taken this opportunity to show what a horrible father Homer Simpson truly is, or do something with having him obligated legally to stay home with his kids and unable to go drink at Moe's, and show how psychologically it's destroying him. And if Homer was truly unfit to watch all three kids, Marge should have just sent them to stay with Patty and Selma. I'm just gonna say it. Okay, number 2. Bart Simpson is a prankster and also not stupid. I mean, this was the kid who found the one clue that saved Krusty the Clown from prison in the episode Krusty Gets Busted. Essentially what set up his hero-villain relationship with Sideshow Bob. And here, apparently, they portray him as too stupid to figure out that this leprosy is fake. I mean, you'd think he'd rub his... I mean, Homer touched both Ned and one of his kids. You honestly think Bart wouldn't have done the same, having the same level of hatred towards them, and felt nothing when the sores touched Rod and Todd? I mean, in all fairness, it makes no sense that he wouldn't do that and come to the conclusion, hey, wait a second, this is fake. And a lot of these episodes try to imply that Bart Simpson is a lazy, immature piece of trash who does not have any right to exist. Now, if that were true, and he's as horrible as these episodes, as certain episodes say he is, there's no way in hell that he would have agreed to this kind of 3-day leprosy treatment with all those needles. Especially since both Bart and Lisa have a history of not liking, of hating getting shots. This whole episode doesn't make sense. And then there's the fact that they did this plot already in the episode My Sister, My Sitter. And it actually worked there because Bart was actually in character, and Lisa's ego actually got in the way. In all fairness, just because Lisa Simpson was able to successfully babysit 2 church kids and the village idiot does not by any means that she would be able to successfully babysit her brother, who's 2 years older than her, and the eldest child in a family that drives off babysitters left and right. Last time Marge, or in this case, Homer and Marge, put Lisa in charge of Bart and Maggie in this case, basically they were spitting in the face of their firstborn son. So he goes to great lengths to prove that Lisa couldn't handle someone like him. If this were a video game, Rod and Todd Flanders and Ralph Wiggum would have been the easy level, the easy difficulty, where Bart would have been the insanely hard level of difficulty. Also, Lisa put Maggie in a cat carrier and got away with it scot-free, but that's something I will touch on later. My Sister, My Sitter took place in The Simpsons' golden age, as a lot of people on the internet put it. And, yeah, this would have taken place before that episode. So Marge should already have known that Lisa was not ready for the responsibility of essentially babysitting her dad and brother. This whole situation just makes Marge look like even more of an idiot than she is. The worst thing about this episode is the fact that Lisa Simpson faces absolutely no consequences for the stunt she pulled. I mean, at one point in the series when Homer and Bart become Catholic, the plot was kicked off because Bart was framed for a prank he didn't pull and no one believed him. Lisa can somehow prank both her father and brother into thinking they have leprosy. Essentially cause a situation where they get all sorts of needles rammed into their body to the point where they need bandages on them to keep them from bleeding out, even though there is still some blood on the bandages, and she gets away scot-free. Now, in the non-canon future episodes, Lisa does have a daughter who does not respect her. And in all fairness, the disrespect is earned, and this episode would prove why. If Lisa acts the way she does in this episode around her daughter, there's no way that girl will respect her. That girl will do whatever it takes to piss her mother off. Because you gotta remember, Lisa Simpson is an unbelievably entitled character. She was entitled to worship by age 8. I mean, by the time she's in her 30s, her superiority complex and God complex will have gone through the roof. I mean, it would be a complete uphill battle for Lisa's hypothetical daughter to be able to sit in the same room as her mother, let alone like her. Meaning, there's no way she would respect her. I mean, plus, this is The Simpsons. Bart has no respect for Homer, based on the fact that he's a brain-dead alcoholic who does all sorts of stuff on a whim that makes his and or other members of the family miserable. By that logic, this girl should be doing everything in her power to piss her bitch mother off. Eating meat, marrying a control freak, obeying that control freak's every command, polluting the environment, everything, as long as it gets her entitled cunt of a mother who, might I remind you, has a god complex, screaming and shouting like the raving lunatic that she is. And on the subject of Lisa Simpson never receiving consequences for any of the stunts she pulls, well, this might come off as an unpopular opinion, but Seth MacFarlane actually figured out how to make a character like this work. Because Lisa is essentially the Brian Griffin of The Simpsons. You see, the last few seasons of Family Guy that I saw, Seth MacFarlane actually perfected the concept of writing a self-righteous, egotistical, liberal douchebag. My example comes from the last few seasons of Family Guy. You see, the season that I watched, and this was before the Disney merger was announced, Brian was a liberal asshole. Yes, he was a liberal asshole. But whenever he did something douchey, Seth MacFarlane always wrote in a karmic punishment for Brian that would take effect at least by the end of the episode. Brian tries to impress a woman that he's only interested in because of her body by buying an expensive diamond ring. Well, Chris eats the ring, and by the time Brian gets back to the jewelry store, they won't accept it back and give him his money back. Brian shows up at Chris's school to find out whether or not Chris is going to be pranked and gets distracted, acts like a creep and hits on some girls. Well, the school officer kicks his ass. Brian essentially destroys a arranged marriage in India in an attempt to get a date with the former bride-to-be. Well, the episode ends with the family singing a musical number as Brian gets mauled by a white tiger. The episode Little Big Mom essentially just proved that episodes such as Bart to the Future and the future episodes could never be canon. You know, the episode where Bart plays a prank at a Native American casino and the owner essentially gives him a vision of his future to teach Bart a lesson and he apparently doesn't learn anything because this guy made sure that in the vision he'd give Bart the worst future possible, and it would teach him a lesson. Well, he apparently knows nothing about Lisa. If she is as irresponsible and essentially rotten as she is in the episode Little Big Mom, there's no goddamn way she'd ever be elected president. Unless that is she somehow managed to blackmail and or bribe every member of both the Senate and Congress. And if this guy's magic actually could see the future, he would know that. The girl's clearly she's clearly not in a good state of mind. I mean, almost a week living with two slobs drives her to the point where she's seeing people that aren't even there. Despite what you think, Lisa Simpson is not smart. She's entitled. And with the way she acted in Little Big Mom, there's no way she'd ever be elected president. Especially with the way she acted in the seasons that came out in the 2010s. I mean, in the one episode in the 2010s where they moved to that nerd state, by the time they moved back, Lisa had already lost her grip on reality. In all fairness, there is no way she would ever be elected president if this is the way she was before she lost her grip on reality. With how much of an ass this girl is in the Bitch Monster segment I did about her last year, combined with the fact that she is indeed a shit mother, and all the stuff she did after season 11, there is no goddamn way the American people would ever elect Lisa Simpson as president. And this kind of was the first step that debunked not only the entire episode, but the future ones as well as being non-canon. Lisa Simpson could never be president. Like I said, she'd have to bribe and or blackmail basically 2/3 of the people who write our laws to make that happen. And that's on top of the chance that all they need to do is look up her name and they'd probably find out a lot of her shitty behavior, all the horrible things she's done in the past. Doesn't really matter what job she has prior, there's no way in hell she would ever win that election. In fact, a future episode actually stated that no one would vote for her. She apparently couldn't even win class president. In closing, I know this was supposed to be a review of just the episode Little Big Mom, but it kind of became an attack on The Simpsons' 11th season as a whole. I mean, People say that The Simpsons began to go downhill after season 8. I think, in my opinion, season 12 is when it actually got good. And in all fairness, despite the fact that Matt Groening left, this seems like the kind of episode he would write. So, with that said, I am hereby ending the review.